Nara still remembers the long ride into Kaimaro, the way the town lights flickered across the bus windows while she practiced her greetings under her breath. She had packed small gifts, nothing fancy, just things chosen with care. Leto kept telling her his family would welcome her, but she could feel her heartbeat in her throat as they walked up the path to his childhood home. The moment the door opened, the air changed. His mother barely looked at her. His sisters whispered behind their hands. When Nara tried to sit near Leto, a stool slid away and someone said she should make space for actual family. She laughed softly, trying to show she didn't mind, then lowered herself to the floor even though it burned inside her. The jokes kept coming, little stings disguised as teasing, until she felt herself shrinking smaller and smaller. Then footsteps sounded at the doorway, firm and slow, and the whole room stood up. Aunt Kairmi had arrived from distant Zaribo. Her sharp eyes moved across the room and stopped on Nara sitting on the floor. The silence that followed felt louder than any words. She asked why the young woman was down there when there were empty chairs. No one answered. Instead, she pulled out a seat beside her and called Nara over like she had been waiting for her. As Nara sat, Kairmi spoke about dignity and kindness, then revealed she had known Nara's late father, who once helped her family in a dark season. Shame washed across the room. People rushed to offer seats, plates, apologies. Nara thanked them, but her forgiveness stayed quiet and distant. When she finally stepped outside, the sky over Kaimaro felt wide and gentle. Leto held her hand tighter than before. She walked away knowing she had entered that house with fear, but she was leaving with her head high, certain she would never let anyone place her on the floor again. Nara tells this story like someone remembering a dream they wish they could rewrite. She says the house in Kaimaro looked harmless enough from the outside, painted a warm yellow with a mango tree leaning over the gate, but the moment she stepped into the living room she felt something tighten around her spirit. The air felt crowded even though no one spoke directly to her. Leto's mother gave her a single brief glance, the kind you give a stranger you're not sure you want inside, then turned away as if Nara had already taken up too much space. His sisters floated around with plates of steaming rice and fried tilu fish, whispering behind their palms, stealing little looks at her like she was a story they weren't sure they believed. Nara kept telling herself to smile, to breathe, to remember she had come here with love. When she moved to sit beside Leto, hoping for a bit of safety, one of his sisters shifted the stool away with a soft scrape on the floor and said she should sit down there instead so they could make room for actual family. Nara laughed quietly at first, thinking she must have misheard, but the eyes in the room didn't blink. They waited for her to obey. She felt her throat close, and for a moment she couldn't feel her own hands. Leto looked at her, then at his mother, and Nara saw the battle in his eyes. She wanted him to choose her, but she also saw the fear in him, the fear of causing trouble in a house that had shaped him since childhood. So he stayed quiet. He didn't take her hand. He didn't move the stool back. He just gave her a small, uncertain nod as if to say, "Please, just for now." That hurt more than any whisper. Nara lowered herself to the floor, the cold tiles pressing against her knees, and tried to act like she didn't feel a single thing. She placed her hands neatly in her lap and kept her gaze on the food laid out on the table. She listened to the clatter of plates and the soft bursts of laughter that somehow never included her. Someone joked loudly that she was lucky they even let her in. Another said she looked like she might faint if the family got any bigger. Nara felt each word settle on her like dust. She tried to smile whenever a face turned toward her, but she felt her eyes burning, her heart pushing upward like it wanted to escape. She wondered if she should stand up and leave, walk right out of the house, even if it meant walking all the way back to town alone. But Leto's leg brushed her shoulder as he shifted in his seat, a small reminder that he was still there, still hers, still hoping she would hold on. She didn't want to shame him or start a scene, so she sat still, breathing in short, careful breaths. The room moved around her like she wasn't part of it, like she was a shadow in the wrong corner. And yet, even in that painful moment, she felt something steady forming quietly inside her, something that promised the story wouldn't end the way the room expected. Nara says she can still feel the cold of those tiles through her dress, as if the floor itself wanted to remind her she didn't belong there. She lowered herself slowly, trying to pretend her heart wasn't pounding, trying to look calm enough that no one would see how much she wanted to run. The room moved on without her. Lito's sisters laughed as they passed bowls around, and someone joked that she should be thankful they even let her inside the door. Another voice rose above the chatter, teasing that she looked too nervous to survive in a family as large and loud as theirs. The laughter that followed felt sharp, almost metallic, and Nara forced a smile, hoping it might soften something in the air. But her chest stayed tight, as if the room had shrunk around her. She focused on her breathing the way her mother once taught her, slow and steady, like counting waves on the shore of Lake Maritu. It helped for a moment, but then another comment floated her way and she felt the sting again. She wondered if she should stand up and leave before she started crying. She pictured herself walking out into the sunlight, calling a motorbike, riding back to town with her gifts still untouched in her bag. But every time she tried to imagine it, she saw Lito's face, the way he looked at her earlier when he squeezed her hand at the gate. She didn't want to disappoint him, didn't want him to think she couldn't handle one difficult afternoon with his family. So she stayed. She kept her back straight and her hands folded, even though her palms were shaking. When someone passed a plate over her head without even seeing her, she laughed quietly, the kind of laugh you let out when nothing else feels safe. Lito shifted in his chair, and she felt his knee brush her shoulder again, a tiny touch that said he knew this was wrong but didn't know how to stop it. That hurt in a different way, because she had always believed he would stand for her, even against his own people. She tried not to look at him, afraid that if their eyes met she might break. Instead, she looked at the window, at the thin line of afternoon light stretching across the floor. She told herself she just needed to hold on until dinner ended, until they could slip away and breathe outside where no one stared at her like she was a mistake. But inside her, something was shifting, slow but certain, like a rope tightening. She felt her own patience thinning, felt a quiet voice rising in her chest saying this was not the life she wanted, not the beginning she deserved. She swallowed that voice along with her humiliation, smiling again when another sister glanced her way, even though her teeth felt cold. For a moment, she wondered if the whole house could hear her heart beating. She sat still anyway, hoping the night would give her a softer ending than the one unfolding around her. The memory always returns to Nara with the same sound. Slow, confident footsteps approaching from the doorway, cutting through the chatter like a blade through cloth. The room shifted at once, voices fading, chairs scraping, bodies rising in respect. Everyone stood except her. She stayed on the floor with her knees pressed against the cold tiles, unsure whether she should rise too or pretend she was invisible. Then Aunt Kairmi entered, the elder from Zaribo whom everyone spoke of with admiration and a little fear. She carried herself like someone who had lived many lives and survived all of them. The moment she stepped inside, the air tightened, and even the whispering sisters fell silent. Kairmi greeted the family with a warm smile, but it slipped the moment her eyes swept the room and landed on Nara. She paused, staring as if she was looking at a puzzle that didn't belong in the picture. Nara felt heat rise up her neck. She lowered her gaze, hoping the older woman would turn away, but Kairmi took a slow step forward, then another, her sandals tapping lightly on the floor. The whole room watched her, breaths held. Nara could tell the woman was confused, maybe even offended by what she saw. There were empty stools, empty chairs, and yet here sat a young woman on the floor like a visitor who didn't dare reach for comfort. Kairmi's eyes sharpened, catching every small detail. The nervous way Nara held her hands together, the stiff posture of Lito's mother, the guilty glances of the sisters. Even Lito looked frozen, half rising from his seat as if unsure whether to explain or hide. Nara felt a strange mix of fear and relief. Fear because she didn't know what Kairmi would say, and relief because for the first time that afternoon she felt seen. truly seen. The room seemed to hold its breath as Kyermi tilted her head, studying the family with a quiet intensity that made everyone shift uncomfortably. She asked no questions yet, but her expression alone felt like a question that none of them wanted to answer. Nara felt her own heartbeat steadying, as if something inside her finally had a witness. The house, which had felt so loud earlier, now felt painfully quiet. Even the pots in the kitchen stopped clattering. Nara raised her eyes just enough to see Leto's mother stiffen, her hands tightening around the serving spoon. The sisters looked away, pretending to adjust plates that didn't need adjusting. And still, Kyermi kept her gaze on Nara, not with pity, but with a kind of fierce clarity that made the young woman sit up a little straighter. It was in that charged silence, with everyone waiting for the elder to speak, that Nara felt the first gentle spark of hope. She didn't know what Kyermi would say or do, but she knew the moment she walked in, the room no longer belonged to those who had mocked her. It had shifted, quietly but completely, and something deep inside Nara whispered that the story was about to turn. Later, when Nara thinks back to that afternoon, she always remembers the exact tone of Aunt Kyermi's voice, firm enough to slice through the quiet but steady enough to make the walls feel closer. The elder looked around the room, at the empty chairs, at Nara on the cold tiles, then asked in a clear, ringing voice why the young woman was sitting on the floor. No one moved. No one breathed. The question felt like it had weight, like it had fallen into the center of the room and cracked something open. Leto's mother was the first to react. She gave a shaky laugh that didn't sound like her usual confidence and said Nara had insisted on sitting there, that she liked being comfortable. The lie floated into the silence and dropped heavy, as if the house itself refused to carry it. Kyermi's face didn't soften. She stared at Leto's mother long enough that the woman looked away, her fingers fidgeting with the edge of her wrapper. The sisters avoided eye contact, pretending to rearrange plates that were already neat. Even Leto looked shaken, his hands tightening on the arms of his chair. Then Kyermi stepped forward, slow but deliberate, and pulled out a wooden chair with a soft scrape across the floor. She placed it beside her own seat, not near the others, not tucked in the corner, but right at her side where everyone could see it. She turned to Nara and spoke her name in a tone that felt both gentle and unbreakable, a tone that left no room for hesitation. Nara felt her body react before her mind could catch up. She rose from the floor, legs trembling slightly, and walked across the room. Every pair of eyes followed her, but this time the staring didn't feel cruel. It felt like something old and dusty had been thrown into the light. She sat down on the chair, unsure if she should smile, unsure if she was allowed to breathe normally again. Kyermi placed a hand on her shoulder for a moment, steady and warm, and the touch felt like someone striking a match in a dark place. The room stayed silent, but it was a different kind of silence now. It felt charged, almost electric, the kind that comes right before a storm changes direction. Nara could feel the shift, subtle but powerful, like a curtain lifting. Leto's mother kept her eyes on the floor. One of the sisters bit her lip and looked away quickly when Nara glanced at her. Leto exhaled shakily, and Nara realized he had been holding his breath ever since Kyermi asked the question. It wasn't just a question to him or to the family. It had revealed something they all hoped would stay hidden. And for the first time since she arrived, Nara felt the heavy weight on her chest loosen slightly, not because the room had grown kinder, but because someone had finally spoken the truth out loud. Nara sat beside Aunt Kyermi, feeling the whole room lean in, though no one dared move. The elder's voice was calm, almost gentle, but every word settled heavily in the air as she spoke about how people should treat one another, how kindness is not a decoration you pull out only for guests you approve of, and how dignity is something every human deserves the moment they walk through a door. No one interrupted her. The sisters stared at their laps. Leto's mother kept smoothing the edge of her wrapper even though it lay perfectly flat. Nara listened quietly, unsure where this was leading, her heart still beating fast from all she had swallowed moments before. Then Kyermi turned to her with a look so soft it made Nara's throat tighten. She said she knew exactly who Nara was from the moment she stepped inside the house. The room shifted again, confused. Kyrmi continued, explaining that many years ago, during a dark season in Zaribo, her family had been on the edge of losing everything, and a man named Bani Lul, Nara's father, had stepped in when he had nothing to gain. His help had saved them, given them a chance to rebuild their lives. Kyrmi said she never forgot his face or the quiet strength he carried, and when she saw Nara standing uncertainly by the door earlier, she saw that same strength shining through her fear. The room fell completely silent. Even the children in the courtyard seemed to quiet down, as if the whole world paused to hear the truth settle. Nara felt warmth spread through her chest, the kind that almost hurts because it arrives right after too much pain. She looked down at her hands, remembering her father's stories, the way he used to give without expecting applause. She never knew he had helped someone so important to Lido's family. Lido's mother finally lifted her eyes, and for the first time since Nara arrived, there was no sharpness in them, only something like regret. The sisters looked stunned, their earlier jokes suddenly small and childish in the shadow of this new truth. Lido's face softened with both pride and guilt, and he shifted closer as if trying to rewrite the last hour with his body alone. Shame moved across the room like a slow wave, touching everyone who had spoken carelessly, everyone who had watched Nara shrink without stepping in. Kyrmi folded her hands and leaned back slightly, letting the story sink in, letting the weight of it rest where it belonged. Nara breathed in deeply, the first breath of the day that didn't feel tight or stolen. Something inside her felt newly anchored, not because she had been defended, but because the truth had stepped forward on its own and revealed its light. She didn't look around to see who was staring at her now. She didn't need to. The shift in the room was enough. For the first time that afternoon, she felt the ground beneath her steady, as if the story of her father had reached out across time to place a hand on her shoulder and lift her up. What happened next still feels unreal to Nara, as if the room flipped itself over in one long breath. A moment earlier, she had been the girl on the floor no one wanted to claim. Now chairs scraped forward from every direction. Someone rushed to bring her a soft cushion. Another placed a plate of roasted endema fish in her hands as if they had prepared it just for her. The sisters who had whispered about her now smiled too widely, their voices suddenly sweet, their eyes darting between her face and Aunt Kyrmi's steady gaze. Even Lito's mother stepped closer with a trembling bowl of stew, saying she hoped Nara would try it because it was her special recipe, as though that same sharp tongue hadn't pushed her to the floor an hour earlier. Nara accepted each gesture with a gentle nod, her voice soft but controlled. She didn't lash out. She didn't gloat. She simply thanked them one by one, not letting the sudden warmth drag her into their rewritten story. Inside, she felt a quiet steadiness growing, the kind that arrives when truth has done what you couldn't do yourself. Lido looked different now, as if something heavy had fallen from his shoulders and landed right at his feet. His eyes kept finding hers, full of worry and regret, and he opened his mouth twice before any words came out. When he finally said he was sorry, truly sorry, his voice cracked a little. He looked like a man seeing his own silence for the first time. Nara met his gaze with calm understanding, not anger, but not easy forgiveness either. She needed him to feel this moment, to remember it, to never sit quietly in the shadows of his own family again. Around them, the room buzzed with nervous kindness. The sisters asked where she bought her dress. An uncle she hadn't noticed earlier insisted she take the most comfortable chair. Someone offered her a sweet bun wrapped in banana leaf and said they were sure she liked them, though they had never asked before. Nara felt her breathing slow, her shoulders ease, her heartbeat settle back into her chest. For the first time since she crossed the doorway of the Kaimoro house, her body felt like her own again. She could feel her feet on the ground, her hands resting lightly on her lap, her voice steady and clear. She watched the family fuss over her, trying to erase what they had done by drowning her in attention, and she realized she didn't need their approval to stand tall. The truth had walked into the room and opened every window, and in that new light she felt a soft, rising strength that belonged only to her. She didn't need to rewrite history with them. She only needed to remember who she was before they tried to make her small. When the sun began to sink behind the roofs of Kaimaro, and the visit finally came to an end, Nara felt both exhausted and strangely light, as if the weight she carried in had slipped off her shoulders without asking permission. Aunt Kairmi walked her all the way to the gate, holding her arm the way a loving aunt would guide a daughter. At the gate she pulled Nara into a warm hug that smelled of jasmine and old wisdom, whispering that she deserved better in every corner of her life, not just in that house. Nara closed her eyes for a moment, letting the words settle deep inside her. When Kairmi stepped back, Leto reached for Nara's hand and held it tight, the kind of hold that confessed everything he couldn't say earlier. His voice was quiet but firm when he promised he would never let her face something like that alone again. She didn't answer immediately. She just squeezed his hand gently, letting him know she heard him, but also that trust needed time to grow back. As they walked down the dusty road, leaving the compound behind them, Nara noticed how different the evening air felt. It brushed against her skin like something alive, something proud of her. Her steps grew stronger with each stride, and for the first time that day, she lifted her head fully and breathed in the world without fear. She thought about the girl who had entered the house trembling, the girl who had sat on the cold floor pretending she didn't mind, and she realized she was no longer that girl. She had walked out honored, seen, and steady in her own spirit. She knew now that no voice, no room, no family would ever place her on the floor again.